Hello and welcome to the Green Machine podcast, your Irish football news and nostalgia. I'm Dave, your host, and I'm joined by Martin to bring you the latest instalment of the tournament series as we cover the infamous US Cup. Martin, what comes to mind when you think of this rather obscure, as Nick would like to say, competition that's become nicely enshrined in Irish football history?
Well, Dave, we've only won 2 tournaments in our history, and I think why Jack and Mick later on wanted to go to the US Cup was to possibly give us another trophy. And I think our close links with America, the diaspora there, I think it was quite a clever move to go there on the back of 1990 as well. We first headed off, so it was a good opportunity for us to as well give the lads a break, get the Irish support behind them over in America. So interesting tournaments that I'm looking forward to covering here this evening.
So let's have a look at the 1992 installment of the US Cup, the first installment of the US Cup. Jack had offered the players the opportunity of taking a holiday because, they all had a very long season, all playing at top clubs in England, or going on a low-key, as he thought at the time, tour of the United States. Now, the players had played it the previous year in a game, and they really enjoyed it, had a nice time. So they said, we'll go back to the States. It's a nice low-key tournament. Everything would be fine. Apparently, everyone would regret that decision dramatically. Afterwards, Jack was under the illusion that the tournament would be nice and relaxed to help put the US team into gear for USA 94. But it actually ended up with Portugal and Italy, with the games being shown, as well as the United States, by the way, with the games being shown around the world, including Ireland. He felt he was misled a little bit, but probably a bit of a money spinner. And it was the first ever US Cup, as we did mention before. And the team actually flew out after the Albania game, which I think was their first game, Martin, wasn't it, of the USA 94 qualifier?
It was, yeah. We played it on the 26th of May. So it was interesting, actually, that 92 season. You got to remember that the end of the season, we had 2 Irish players actually involved in the FA Cup final that year. Ray Houghton for Liverpool against Sunderland. John Byrne was the other player. In the run-up, actually, at the end of April, before that cup final, they played the USA at home, and they won convincingly there, winning 4-1, a very late goal by USA. But they then played in the World Cup qualifier, the first one of that campaign towards the USA 94 qualification, where they won 2-0. Aldo got a goal, you'll be happy to hear. And Paul McGrath was captain in that match as well. Yeah, going off then, it was an interesting one, getting a decent kind of squad he wanted to kind of bring together for that tour. Some really, really good players in it. And I think we have to remember in 1992, obviously, it was at the same time, around the same time as the Euro 92 tournament, which was the last Euros where they had 8 teams basically taking part. So Italy had actually missed out, and so had Portugal. Yeah. So for them, they had one hell of a team, Italy, which we'll come on to focus on. So Jack was probably thinking of it as a holiday rather than anything competitive, whereas actually when they got to play Italy, it was going to be very, very competitive. And the USA, obviously, in the first game, gave us a bit of a test in time.
Yeah, we'll get to the game shortly, but I just, yet again, it's in the diary. It's absolutely hilarious. But Ireland had missed out on Euro 92 as well after going through the group unbeaten, scoring the most amount of goals, but England took her place last. That is one that got away, sadly, Euro 92. So here we are, we're in the States, very relaxed affair. And I thought this was hilarious, Martin. Jack basically wrote in the diary, I'm laying down the law here. It's a holiday, but his idea of laying down the law was basically don't be pissed and be in your room by 10:30 the night before the game. Fair enough. And also, he did mention that on the way over that the players got absolutely hammered on the flight over. But Jack didn't realize because he was, quote, sitting at the front of the plane. What's normally at the front of the plane? What section's that?
First class hospitality. You go left for the, some people don't realise today you go left. I've never been fortunate enough to do that. Not able to blag the old flights. But no, it was an interesting one. And Jack was up there with the Blazers and probably, a bit of very old FII kind of mentality there. They were all on the jolly, and as would be seen down the line at USA 94, very much the way that it was operated then. Football really here on this tour was probably secondary kind of consideration.
Duty free number 1.
Yeah, I think so.
So let's have a look at the games here. So first up was the USA, who tend to do quite well in their home tournament, funnily enough. On the 30th of May 92, they would beat Ireland 3-1, convincingly. And McCarthy would get the consolation goal there. Actually, Ireland would take the lead. I think it was a header by Mick. His last goal for Ireland as well, by the way, because he would retire very shortly after this. And basically, yeah, Ireland would take the lead in the 51st minute, and then the USA in the 54th, 70th, and 87th minute would make it 3-1. I remember listening to this game on the radio. I remember coming home from school, and we switched it on. This game wasn't on the telly, Martin. I don't know what way you had it in England, but it was on RT radio and had to listen to it, and I was shocked that we were losing for a start, because Ireland didn't lose many games during that time, but actually losing to the States. And, I mean, look at the squad that we had as well. Did you get to see any of this or hear any of this? Or
I don't remember this much at all, to be honest. But I think this is really the start of the USA doing quite well in international football, or really getting going. Because looking back now, I think they also beat England 2-0, which was the first time since the 50s that they'd beaten England.
That was hilarious.
That was very funny as well. And they weren't a powerhouse of football. I know they aren't really now, I suppose, either. But It was an interesting game to watch back, as part of the research for this episode, and see that Mick was wearing number 12. It was a headed goal, cracking header actually, and Ireland did seem in quite good control of the game overall. Terry Phelan, friend of the pod, played. He got stuck in and was very aggressive, and we actually conceded a goal, very sloppy goal from that set piece. I mean, fans of the kind of Premier League or early days of the Premier League will maybe be familiar with John Harkes and Roy Wegley. It was actually Roy Wegley from the America's debut that night, and he was incredible for their third goal. But it was a shock ultimately, because United States, they weren't a big name then, but it was their home tournament, and I think it just showed. Losing 3-1, they weren't that bothered. But if you watch back the footage, which is very grainy and very old, now very dated like ourselves,
speak for yourself.
It's interesting to see. The lads were quite shocked, I think, and disappointed conceding sloppy goals, and looked hungover, to be honest.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, Jack would allude to the word he would use a lot was attitude. Attitude equals hungover. And just before we move on to the next game, let's just want to go through the squad here. So in goal, you had Jerry Payton, good old Jerry. Lovely fella, by the way. Chris Morris, right back. Kevin Moore and Mick McCarthy, centre back. Terry Phelan, left back. You had Paul McGrath in midfield. Steve Staunton, left midfield. Roy Keane, centre midfield. Ray Houghton on the right. Andy Townsend in the centre as well with Roy Keane. And you would have had Niall Quinn up front, because Jack played, because he would actually play this during the Euro 94, the World Cup 94 qualifier. He'd actually play 5 in midfield, wouldn't he? And he'd actually kind of play that towards the end. So that's a really strong team, with Dennis Irwin coming on, Al McLaughlin coming on, even Tommy Coyne making an appearance there as well. And actually, Roy Keane was injured in that game, and he would miss the tournament, but be more on him later on. Good old Roy in the US Cup, Martin. Look forward to delving into that a little bit later on. So we'll move on to the next game anyway. That was a complete humiliation, I thought, at the time, and I know Jack was furious. And do read his diary, by the way, the US 94 diary, if you can get it. So next game, 4th of June, 1992. And this game was shown on RT, and I do remember watching. I'm being puzzled by the whole thing. I was only 8 at the time, 7 really, thinking, what's this about? But we lose 2-0 to Italy, who had knocked us out 2 years previous at the quarterfinals of the World Cup. Signori on the 17th minute, and Costa Curta with a 66-minute penalty. Did you get to see any of this at the time, Mark? Was it? I don't think it was shown in England, was it?
No, I don't think it was. No, but looking back at it again, as I said, Italy hadn't qualified for the Euros. A very strong Soviet Union won their group, and then you'll like this, Dave. They actually took part in that Euros as the CIS, which was
I had the jersey.
Independent states.
I had the jersey.
I suppose that was to do with war or something.
But I could actually explain what happened, but that would be a whole other podcast. I'd add about half an hour. But I actually had that shirt. It was red, had the Adidas equipment, and it had the shoulder, the shoulder stripes. Yeah, I had on each side. And my mom didn't know how to wash it properly, so it went from being the CIS to just Adidas.
Yeah. But it's a very, I mean, looking back at the Italy squad, though, very strong team. Like, Walter-Zenga in goal, Baresi was there, Maldini, Vialli was on the bench, Mancini up front, Signori. It was a savage team, really. And they did give us a bit of an education, to be honest. I think they were taking it a lot more seriously than us. Mick was back in as captain for that game, I think. It was an interesting game, wasn't it? Ireland wore all green, and I was looking back at this game earlier and watching it and seeing, like, why did we wear all green? Because they were wearing their white shirts and blue, and then 2 years later in Giant Stadium we wore white shorts rather than with our green shirts, and they wore the same kit again. So that's just for the kit aficionados there. But it was a weird one wearing all green, I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, it was a strange one. I mean, I know they took the lead, decent goal, to be honest, but the penalty, that was the kind of change of the game, really. Paki Bonner was sent off for
a dive, wasn't it?
It was a savage dive, yeah, and also he was offside, wasn't he? A mile offside.
Yeah, he's a mile offside.
Made a big deal of it, which Jack was really annoyed about, and it just seemed to take an age to get off the pitch when you look back at the footage. And Jerry Payton came on after playing in the first game. Obviously, he had his chance again in the goal, but he wasn't able to save the penalty.
Actually, turns out as well, the referee, Jack Di Aquila, I'm probably butchering that. He was actually of Italian extraction. Played 2, lost 2. And actually, the day after this game, yet again, this is all in the diary. So if you think I'm making it all up, folks, have a have a read of the diary. But Andy Townsend actually came to Jack and said that, he and the players wanted to prepare properly for the Portugal game, the last game, because, as Jack would say, we've worked so hard for this reputation being one of the best teams in the world, and they were, by the way, and now we're kind of pissing away because, well, they are literally pissing it away because they're pissed. They're hammered, and basically Jack says, yeah, okay, fair enough. So they actually prepared properly for the Portugal game. Do you think that had anything to do? Because Mick was the captain, and I think Kevin Moran was the vice captain at the time. Do you really think? I think that this is when Jack, he doesn't mention it, this is when Jack decided that Andy Townsend was going to be, because he would take over as the captain, wouldn't he? This has to be the moment.
It must be, yeah. He's mentioned it in the diary as well, which is an excellent read, as you said. And I think, yeah, it's to show Mick hadn't been playing as much, coming off the bench and things like that. And yeah, I think this was a bit of a change of the guard. I mean, Kevin Moran did go to '94 World Cup, but he was very, very old by then. And excellent player for us, of course. But yeah, I think this is it where you're going to have a young leader on the pitch, and Andy Townsend was incredibly highly rated then, and a fantastic player for us.
Quality player.
Yeah.
Very vocal as well. Very vocal. The thing with Mick is, and I love Mick, he was never vocal about things off the pitch. That was his problem. And you can read stuff about that in Frankly Speaking, Frank Stapleton's autobiography, which is hilarious if you did get a chance. Frankly Moaning. But he says that about Mick. He didn't say anything, and he was the captain when they were having the fight over the players' pool. So he wouldn't really rock the boat with these things. So Andy Townsend obviously stepping up and going, listen, this isn't good enough. We need to do something about it. And that brings us to the next game, which was on the 7th of June, where Ireland would beat Portugal 2-0. Steve Staunton with a direct corner, and Tommy Coyne on the 89th minute making it 2-0. But Ireland battered Portugal in this one. They were really all over them, but could only score 2 goals. But Jack was happy enough with it. But he did say afterwards that he wouldn't go back to the US Cup, and he wouldn't. He would go to the World Cup 2 years later, but not to the US Cup. The USA would win the tournament. Italy came second, Ireland was third, and Portugal would finish last. So after all that, Ireland were invited back to the 1996 US Cup. Ireland basically missing out on the Euro 96 competition that summer due to, getting their ass handed to them by Holland in Anfield in December 95, 2-0. New manager, new direction, new player. A bit of a weird mix. So anyway, Mick did try to bring a young and experimental side to the US Cup because he had to get ready for the France 98 qualifiers, which would start in September. I think it was Liechtenstein was the first game back. Now, he wanted to build a team around a particular young Corkman at the time, Mr. Roy Keane, and he wanted to make him captain for the tour. So Andy Townsend, the team captain at the time, was going to stay home with the older players. I think Alan Kernahan actually ended up coming on this tour for his last appearance in green. But he wanted Roy Keane to come. which Sage, hold on, just dying to get involved in this, which is a sage move, I would say, for a young manager. However, it didn't quite work out that way, did it, Martin?
No, it didn't, but I think it was a very clever move from him on the back of a man of the match performance in the FA Cup final. I know people say that it was Cantona got the winning goal against Liverpool, but if you look back at the performance of Roy Keane in that final, he was absolutely immense, and a lot of people who would say Keane was brilliant in that match. And that was a match as well on the 11th of May that was littered with Irish players as well. You had Phil Babb, McAteer taking part as well, Dennis Irwin, of course. So those lads were all probably looking forward to going off on this USA Cup trip a few weeks later. And I think it was a very shrewd move of Mick probably trying to kind of reconcile a little bit with Roy, because Roy is the biggest name in football now, let's be honest, in Irish football, certainly. And to make him captain and give him that leadership opportunity, especially on the back of he had injury problems. He had missed a lot of the qualifiers of Euro 96, sadly, as well. But I think it was kind of reconciliation, as I said, and an opportunity to kind of put that aside.
And also people probably wonder what reconciliation. Well, we kind of skipped over it a little bit because we left it for this part. But at the end of the US Cup 92, Roy was out injured. And obviously Mick was coming to the end of his career, but him and Steve Staunton got absolutely rad-arsed the night before and showed up late for the bus. And anyway, all the senior players were sitting there waiting for these two lads to show up. And when he eventually did, Mick laid into the two players and Roy took exception, didn't he? What was it he said to him? Your first trip away with the lads, disgrace. And Roy said to him, to Mick, he goes, first touch, disgrace.
Yeah,
something like that, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Call yourself a professional, something like that.
Yeah.
Lots of different kind of hearsay ever since, but that was where it kind of probably started between Mick and Roy, and obviously we know how that kind of developed in time.
So anyway, let's have a look at some dates here, Martin. We'll do it this way: a nice, concise time frame of Roy acting the bollocks here. 23rd of May, 1996, Roy Keane made captain for the US Tour. An honour, you would think, Martin. An honour to be captain of your country. There had been doubts over Keane's dedication to Ireland, having only played 3 out of Ireland's 11 Euro 96 qualifying games. However, 3 days later, on the 26th of May, 1996, Roy Keane, your hero, Martin, goes AWOL and does not show for Mick's testimonial. A 3-0 win over Celtic, a Celtic 11. Keane is then banned by the FAI and stripped of the captaincy. But wait, there's more. On the 29th of May, 3 days later, Roy Keane gives a statement during Ireland's 1-0 loss to Portugal, explaining his absence. Mick only becomes aware of it in the post-match press conference as it's read to him. Roy has admitted, he didn't really want to go in it, and he probably should have done better to tell Mick about this. I understand, and even you as a Roy Keane diehard, I understand that on one hand, yes, Mick wanted to build a team around Roy Keane because Andy Townsend probably had one campaign left, which he did. But I also understand that, Roy had a hard season, and at that time he was a box-to-box midfielder at that time, wasn't he? And subsequently would become a defensive midfielder, but he's still box-to-box. So he probably did need to rest and probably didn't want to go on a tour that was essentially a piss of 4 years previous. So I do get all that, and I understand that. But surely to God, there's a better way to communicate that, or actually communicate that to your manager, and not just simply go AWOL, which is what he did.
I think, look, this is, I'm not going to defend Roy with the communication here, because I think that is it. He probably knew, it probably gone to his head a little bit. He's not the first, and he won't be the last Irish player where it's gone to his head. But, he was the biggest profile player in the squad. Yeah. Given the captaincy as an opportunity to kind of give him that leadership responsibility, but he's obviously just thrown it back at Mick's face. And it's a shame, really, because Roy was approaching his peak years here, and a year later he's going to be injured. He's going to miss out for a year. So, he didn't go too much longer where he got that terrible injury where he was out for a whole campaign. And it was obviously a massive cost to Man United, but also to Ireland's opportunities of qualifying in 98 as well. So he it doesn't set well with me how he behaved then, but I just
No.
think he was probably too big for his boots and thought Ireland didn't need me more than I need them. He's at his peak years of Man United.
He has a point. I get that, but the way he went about it is absolutely piss poor. My God, we need to have to make sure when I record this and save it, have to fucking put it in a safe. Jesus, Martin, you've actually criticised Roya. I best actually keep this under lock and key here. That's a rarity anyway. So let's have a look at it. Ireland this time would obviously be drawn with the USA, Mexico, and Bolivia. And first up will be the home team again, and that would be the United States. Ireland would take the lead with a lovely goal by David Connolly. And unfortunately, that wouldn't last very long, where Ramos would score 1 minute later with Claudio Reyna getting the winner on the 76th minute. I remember this highlight package being shown. It was during the Euro 96. I was watching with my uncle Willie, who was born in Cork but become a US citizen, and we were kind of having a bit of a rivalry, and he was cheering on the US, actually, treacherous bastard. Was this wasn't shown in England either, was it?
No, it wasn't that. No. But this was a
glad we got you on board for this, Martin. Eh?
Yeah. No, look, I do remember it though, and looking back on it, because I know there was a lot of hype, wasn't there, of David Connolly at the time. Young player coming through for Ireland, and it is a fantastic goal actually, the one he gets against the US, and a brilliant reverse pass from Liam O'Brien, another former Man United player, a bit of a ledge. Met him a few summers ago, really nice guy. It was a really good enterprising young Irish team here. This was Mick really setting out his stall and giving people opportunities to get into his squad, basically. I mean, you can even see the influence that Mark Kennedy had on this very young Irish team here, attacking, kind of fearless in a way. And all of them seem to be taking their opportunity in Mick's squad. You've got to remember, it's a very fledgling squad that he had here, setting out his stall for the qualification campaign for 98. Definitely giving them all a chance. And that again brings it back to why Roy Keane wasn't there, because he was going to be seen by Mick as, you are a young lad yourself, you could be leading these lads into war, basically. And we did have the experience as well, but looking back, I think we actually did very, very well in some of the games, and we were very attacking and a real threat.
Yeah, well, don't give it all away. We're going to go through the games. Next up, on the 12th of June 96, yet again not shown in RTE, highlight package. I remember watching this at the time. This was mental. Mexico 2, the Republic of Ireland 2. This was an absolute bloodbath. This Liam Day sent off. Noel Quinn sent off from the bench. Mick McCarthy sent off from the bench, having stuff thrown at him. Packy Bonner's last game. Ireland were actually 2-1 up at this stage, but then Luis Garcia, not the one who drinks sangria for Liverpool, but the fecker that got the goal against Ireland in 2 years previous, actually, USA 94. And this was absolute carnage, wasn't it? The referee was a complete bastard and was actually demoted after the game as well. But it's out there on YouTube, and Martin, you had a look at it today. I'd strongly recommend anyone to look at it. This is crazy.
It was unbelievable watching this. I mean, the referee it's all about him, basically. And he's so theatrical, showing the cards and everything. He couldn't wait to get them out of his pocket. And, it's actually quite an entertaining game. Again, a fantastic goal from Connolly. I mean, he really was on fire for this tournament. And it was assisted by Kennedy. Ian Hart played as well in this. Very young team, as I've said. But, Liam Day, he got a second yellow, it seems, for time wasting. It's actually the reaction of Niall Quinn is all because of the Mexican lad runs over and shows the ref it's his second yellow card. So Niall runs past Daesh, goes on, starts like remonstrating with the guy who's reminded the referee that it's 2 bookings. Mick's pulling him off. And it's that's
a good one. Yeah, you are.
But Mick's roared off the bench, and then Mick's everyone's losing the plot basically, but Mick's turning around to the bench, telling all the lads off and saying, look, let it just be me, and then he ends up getting sent off. It just shows. I think it was a very, I can't emphasize enough. It was such a young team. They were under a lot of pressure. I know they conceded late on as well. It was a poor goal to concede. But, it just was the calmness when you're being robbed by the referee, and even Connolly gets booked. He actually misses the last game because he kicks the ball away very petulantly. So it just was probably a learning curve for them. And I think, something that every international team has to go through.
Yeah, several red cards. That takes us on to the last game of the tournament, which was Bolivia, a 3-0 win for Ireland against Bolivia. Keith O'Neill with a brace and Ian Hart with a goal right on the half time, actually. 3-0 up in the first half. Very important, this game. Martin, can you remember why this game's so important?
Is this Mick's first win?
Yep, his first win, and it took 8 games, which was a massive relief for the manager and for the fans. I could tell you that. I'll never forget that. So the tournament finished up with Mexico winning, Ireland finishing second. It's a bit better. USA third for once, and Bolivia in fourth. Really funny, actually, because Mick vowed not to go back, but unfortunately, Ireland had failed to qualify for Euro 2000, so he had to go back because there would be no tournament football for his very young Irish side. We won't talk about Euro 2000 because that's still a sore point. So a couple of notes here on the US Cup 2000. RT opted not to show the tournament due to late night kickoffs, so Sky Sports showed it instead. I didn't get to see any of this because we didn't have Sky Sports. Did you get to watch it? Did you get to see this one? I'm sure you had Sky Sports.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I watched highlights probably of this. Some of the live stuff I probably did as well.
And for once, Roy Keane actually rang Mick to tell him that he wanted to go to the US Cup, but he got injured. So that was a lovely gesture by Roy, but unfortunately didn't happen. Right, we'll get on to the games. 4th of June was the first one, and it was against Mexico. Mick did right. He went for a 4-3-3. This is actually in his World Cup diary. He went 4-4-3, 4-3-3, not 4-4-3. But after going 2-0 down, he went back to 4-4-2. So Richard Dunn and Dominic Foley with the goals there for Ireland. Next up was a 1-1 draw with the United States. Foley again, he was on fire for this one with the opener for Ireland on the 31st minute, and Razov with an equaliser in the 68th minute. However, Martin, I didn't get to see this game live at the time, but I remember reading about it. But Ireland were robbed, really, with this, weren't they? That goal, having watched it back, was a mile offside.
Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely mile offside. Absolutely robbed, like you said. But, I mean, it was an interesting kind of tournament, this one. But, again, Mick's team is really evolving here. Still got the experience of Niall Quinn. Dean Kiley's in the squad. Alan Kelly's there as well. Really was, though, given opportunities to Richard Dunn, who was going to be a brilliant player for us in future. And, still got Kennedy involved, Matt Hollands on the tour. It was a really hungry young team who were going to go on in a few years' time. And in that next qualifying campaign, basically, to go on and do great things for Ireland to qualify for the World Cup. Spoiler alert. But yeah, we were robbed unbelievably of that. And they're playing against decent players as well. That was it. And yeah, I think it was a good taste for what was to come.
Yep. And unfortunately, as Martin said, and that takes us to the final game, the 11th of June, where Ireland would beat South Africa 2-1. Steve McPhail and Niall Quinn with the goals there for Ireland. Benny McCarthy with the goal there for South Africa. Niall Quinn actually equaling the record of 20 goals. That was Frank Stapleton's record, which lasted for 10 years, actually. Frank Stapleton broke Don Gibbons' record in a friendly against Malta, a World Cup Italian 90 warm-up game. Bit of knowledge for you there, Martin. You know what I mean? Yeah, carrying this podcast. So, unfortunately, Ireland, yet again, would leave empty-handed, would finish second this time behind the USA because Ireland were robbed of a winner. Mexico finished in third, and South Africa with the wooden spoon in fourth. I think this was quite beneficial because Ireland having gone through the tournament undefeated, Martin, this really did set Mick up nicely, didn't it, for the first game of the World Cup qualifiers, which was against Holland in Amsterdam, that 2-2 draw. So it was a decent L start, wasn't it, compared to football?
Yeah, definitely. Going through an end of season tour where a lot of the lads normally don't want to be there, but this was preparation for our World Cup qualification campaign, and it did set us up rightly. As I said, he gave opportunities to lots of the young lads. Roy wasn't there, but we were hoping that Roy would be back to help and lead us to the World Cup, hopefully. Get that in there. But you know,
he did lead us there, Mark. What happened? What happened after that?
Yeah, we don't need to worry about that yet. We don't want to be a spoiler. But yeah, it was good. Like I said, a good mix of a squad. Trusting people, gave plenty of time to goalkeepers and everything, and experimented. Lots of the young lads had opportunities and stuff. So and all did really, really well. And you know, Dominic Foley, you know, it was a surprise to me looking back, seeing how influential he was on this tour. And you know, later on in our Irish history, obviously we've gone on tours again to America, understand, maybe not as the under the US Cup guys, but you know, we did go over there a few times and have played there. And it's always a good trip. It's good for the Irish fans who are over there to see Ireland play. You know, you're looking at the attendances of these games, like 25,000, 30,000. The FAI are obviously getting money from it as well, you would think, from the tours. So they're probably not got the high profile of being mobbed everywhere they go, in a sense. The lads are able to let their hairs down. We've heard some fantastic stories, obviously, in different diaries and exploits of the team. That, you know, they do enjoy going to America because they get such a good welcome. And, you know, I think under Jack, ultimately, we took it to extremes the first time. But I think we learned to use it the right way eventually to help us kind of get together, get a group together, working on things on the training pitch to qualify.
No, absolutely, Mark. Listen, we're going to leave it there. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel wherever you get your podcasts, and to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, which is all in our bio. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, and we'll see you next week.